And we also cover about the second site backup. So mainly to fulfill the 321's requirement on this. And the advanced repository function will also look into the object storages together with SOBR. What is the flexibility using SOBR? So these are some of the terms that you need to be careful, especially when they ask in the exam. Okay, and they do have the capacity tier and archive tier, which one can actually help you to cover the 321 rules compliances. And lastly, we do cover about the protecting data in the cloud. Okay, so today you will see that we are moving towards restoration topic. So the first few topic is a bit longer with labs, etc. The last three is basically a few slides info. It's basically quite short. Right? So do not worry, we will have time to complete all these things, no short nap. So first we'll look into the recovery part. Now, restoring from backup, first thing, we have two options here. First, we look into restoring from backup. Here are looking into the entire virtual machine restoration, things like this. And object recovery will be looking onto granular items such as application item and virtual machine gas OS file item to be restored. Okay, so these two separated. Okay, depends on which particular data that you are trying to restore to the production. So restoring VM and agent backup. So after we back up the data from VMware and Hyper-V, for example, okay, and also plus the agent backup, we can now choose to restore. Virtual machine sharding, you can restore back to your Hyper-V or VMware. Agent itself can restore to bare metal, okay, to physical machine on the same one or the other one. And agent can also restore back to VMware or Hyper-V. Okay, so now, for these two, if you are trying to restore back to your virtualization environment, we do have a feature called Instant VM Recovery here. So this is registered product name for Veeam. So this is another very cool feature that Veeam always push about, talking about shortening your recovery time objective. Now over here you see traditional restoration method. We will need to restore all your data in full back to production before we can utilize the data or power on the VM, for example. Over here you will see when we are trying to achieve instant VM recovery, they are bringing the start VM process in front of your backup restore. Right? So they are basically moving the start VM part first, and then they will restore the data later. That's why you see restart virtual machine directly from a backup file in a matter of seconds. This is the main idea to support the entire instant VM recovery. So how to do that, we will cover it later. Okay, so we will require some infrastructure requirement, etc. So we are utilizing your repository and your backup data. Then after you trigger this task, your virtual machine basically is up and running again. Okay? They can offer services so that you can use your user can already start working on it. Now, this instant VM recovery may be ready within a few minutes time, and your virtual machine will be up and running from the service level. But your particular data will be still sitting in your backup. That's why we can choose to restore to original or new location when we start the task. Okay? So here, let's see, it's a bit different as compared to VMware and Hyper-V using instant VM recovery. Yeah? So first we look into VMware Instant VM Recovery. So we have our backup repository. So the backup repository here comes with your okay, so all your VBK file, your VIB file, etc. Okay. Now the file here basically holds your virtual machine.vmx, virtual machine.vmdk, for example. Okay. Your backup data come with all this content basically. Okay. Comes from your virtual machine originally. Now, before we actually start this, we also need to have another component, what we call mouse server. Yeah. Now, the mouse server is a Windows operating system support component. Okay, operating system support component. Now, if you are using Windows-based repository, okay, so it will be together with mouse server in one. The same machine, they will also use as a mouse server. Now, if you look into your backup configuration, okay, so later when you do a lab, you can double check on it. So if you have, for example, let me bring up my lab environment here. Okay, so if I have a Windows repository, for example, here, okay. Now, if I right-click, go to Property. Now, when you first add in your repository, they will ask you about your mouse server, right? Now, the mouse server can be your own server or any Windows machine. So usually as a Windows repository, I myself can be a mouse server directly. No issue on that. Right? So you will see that over here as a mouse server, when you are triggering a VMware Instant VM Recovery, I will require a write cache folder here to be assigned. So I will require certain capacity, and also using SSD drive is recommended, just not to slow down the performance. And then VMware, we are utilizing vPower NFS service. Okay, so this is for Windows repository. Now, the mouse server is the one that can mount your backup data, read the content before you can actually restore it. Okay. Now, if you look into Linux repository, so this is my Linux repository. So if I go to Property, now you see that the mouse server, I cannot select my own here because the mouse server will only support Windows-based machine. So backup server is one of them, your proxy, even your other backup repository. So if you're using a Linux repository, I will require another middleman to help me mount my backup data before offering all these restoration and instant restore options, things like this. Okay. So this is the requirement especially. So mouse server is required here. Okay, so this is some component that is already there that you did not really see it earlier. So after we have this ready, now when I trigger the task, for example, your production VM now down, I trigger instant VM recovery. We are utilizing vPower function. So in VMware, they call it vPower NFS. vPower NFS. So what they do here is they are initially mounting your particular backup data into NFS data store, right? NFS data store. Now I will suggest later when you do this lab, before you trigger the task, check your vCenter. Okay, you can log into the vCenter, check the environment, and see your particular data store number before you trigger this task. Now, because after you trigger the task, your VMware environment will come with one additional data store that is provided by your mouse server usually. Okay, so let me see here. So if I go to my data store, now I trigger this task before, you will see that from my VMware environment, I do see this additional data store available. Okay, so this data store is basically refers to your backup infrastructure. They are using NFS connectivity. Okay, so you're basically presenting your repository data as a NFS data store, and VMware ESXi can read the data with mouse server help to first boot up your virtual machine. So over here you will see for the instant VM recovery, first is to power on virtual machine from your backup infrastructure. So when the ESXi can see the virtual machine data, I have no problem to boot up the VM. Alright, that's why the first main thing here is to boot up the VM and your virtual machine basically comes back online. You are able to provide the services straight away. Alright, now what is the disadvantage here using this instant VM recovery? This function is here to shorten the overall RTO for your service. I can resume my service as soon as possible, but your backup data is still inside your backup repository. Now you're running with compressed and deduplicated data. Yeah? Your performance for this virtual machine will be lower usually. Because why? Over here, we are using maybe LAN connection for sync. Are you using 1G or 10G for your backup network? So over here, you will see to your production network, you're using FC or iSCSI. First thing. Now, FC or iSCSI come with different speed, etc. Now you are converting your VM running on NFS. First thing. Protocol-wise, they have some differences, and also your link speed might also cause performance issue. And then when your backup data is running in your backup repository, not to mention they are in compressed and dedupe data, in your backup repository, maybe you are using SATA disk, for example, and your production storage is using SSD. Now, because of these type differences, if you use instant VM recovery, your performance will also get slowed down. Okay? That's why the instant VM recovery is pretty cool feature. You can try to deploy and restore via this option, but if your performance is not on par, and maybe after restore the VM initially cannot support too many users at the same time, then maybe you need to announce some degradation status, etc. before the entire data get migrated. Right? Because your data will be sitting in your repository and your mount server here will have your cache folder. So this cache folder is used to capture your Delta VMDK. Now you will see that even your Delta VMDK is sitting in Vim infrastructure. So your new and change data is basically written here. So I will be reading from the backup data, and if there's any new data or change data, it will be written to the Delta VMDK on the mount server instead. So you will see the virtual machine can able to run, but your data is all sitting in Vim backup infrastructure component. Okay. So all this rely on the backup network now, right? Running either 1G or 10G. Usually this will be the speed, and most of the time you will see that backup infrastructure may be going slower, right, due to cost issue, etc. Okay. So that's why you need to be careful with this. It's a cool feature, but it generally have a lot of dependency in order for you to get a very proper performance wise on the virtual machine usage. Okay? So in your instant VM recovery, the first part will be power on. After power on your VM, I need to trigger second task. Okay. Manual, trigger, migrate to production. Okay. Now, when I trigger migrate to production, only the data will start to move from your backup infrastructure back to production environment. So over here, I will be using storage vMotion. Okay. Then your data restore can be online. Okay, so if you want to use this feature and also offering online data restore migration, we require vMotion license, and what we call storage vMotion, because we are moving your virtual machine data from the NFS data store back to your production data store. Okay, so if you do not have the vMotion license, when you trigger the migrate to production, it will shut down all the VM, move the virtual machine data first before they power it on. So it will be offline. Okay, what they call quick migrate. Okay? So this is a bit different and also having some dependency on your licensing part. Okay, so most of the environment should come with storage vMotion already, so be careful on this. Okay. If you are not able to offer online migration, you need to double check whether vMotion is enabled or not, things like this. Okay, so this is instant VM recovery for VMware. Any questions so far for this restoration? Yeah, I think should not be an issue. Pretty straightforward and easy. Okay, so for VMware instant VM recovery, similar case, performance will be another decision-making element, whether you want to go with this or not. But with this, yes, they can shorten our overall RTO requirement because you resume the service first, then only we think about moving the data later. Okay. Now, if you plan to perform instant VM recovery to VMware, to VMware ESXi environment, I can restore data from other platform backup, for example. So if I'm using Veeam to perform the VMware backup, no issue, you can restore back to VMware. Veeam backing up Hyper-V can also restore to VMware. Same thing applies to Agent, Nutanix, Amazon, Azure. This one we already covered yesterday, even vCloud Director. So it's pretty flexible now. That's why you will see they call themselves the cloud data management, because using Veeam as your backup replication software, you can restore your backup basically to any platform supported here. So later they'll give you a very big table, especially focusing on VMware and Hyper-V is pretty flexible now. Right? So those are for VMware. Next thing, Hyper-V instant VM recovery is a bit different. Right? Now using instant VM recovery in Hyper-V, first, they will only do this one. Why? Now, because over here, your repository, they come with your virtual machine .vhdx, right? Okay. So this particular disk will get mounted. Read only. We cannot change the backup data. So I will mount and read, then power on the virtual machine straight away. Okay. So after the virtual machine is powered on, now basically Hyper-V here, they will create already local VHDX. So this guy will be used to cover your new and change data directly. Okay. And then they will also store, read data from backup. Right? Now, as compared to VMware, it's a bit different. VMware, even the Delta disk is running on the backup infrastructure. Hyper-V, a bit different. Hyper-V will create the local VHDX already that will capture your new and changed data, plus any data that you read from your backup before, it will also store here. So usually for Hyper-V, they already start to do some partial data migration and restore. Okay, so it's a bit different as compared to VMware. And utilizing this in Hyper-V, performance shielding will be a bit better, right? Because your Delta is running on the particular production host. Now over here, you will see they still come with two phrases. One is to power on VM. Okay. Then you will see that over here, after that, they will still perform the second task. You need to still manual trigger, okay, migrate online. Okay. So you can do this later in your lab. You need to check. You need to trigger migrate online, okay, manually to conclude the entire task. If not, your data will still be in your backup repository, because when you boot up your VM, it is not necessary to read all the data in the disk. Yeah, they will only read data that's required for your OS, maybe to boot up, for application to run, etc., and for certain data. So there will be maybe majorities of the data still sitting in the backup repository. So we still need to trigger the task to move everything back to production to conclude the task. Okay. So as you can see here for Hyper-V, they are doing dismount. They don't need to have special data or whatsoever because using Windows is pretty easy. You can double click to any VHDX, it is mounted already. Okay. So from here, difference on connectivity requirement, and you will see that your local VHDX is running in the local host already. Okay. So this is a bit different as compared to VMware. Any question for Hyper-V instant VM recovery? Okay, so you see here on the left is the backup data that we have, which is what we call from. So if you back up from Hyper-V, VMware, AHV, all this, I can restore two. On top is actually two, which particular platform, yeah? So I can basically restore all this data that actually protected using Veeam to VMware and Hyper-V without any issue. Okay? AHV can also support VMware, Hyper-V to AHV. Agent can also actually convert to AHV now. Pretty straightforward. See, for public cloud machine, you need to perform backup copy job first before you can restore to it. Okay. Same thing goes to Azure and AWS. Google Cloud Platform different. Google Cloud Platform just supported only. They can only restore using Google Cloud Virtual Machine Backup. Okay, just a moment. Okay, so over here, if you trigger instant VM recovery, okay, instant VM recovery will run until your mount server cache folder full in size, then it will have issue. Generally have no limit to run it, but not recommended to keep it running, and not migrate all back to production. Now, when we trigger this instant VM recovery, this is just to help you speed up the process. You need to move all the data back to production. This is the proper procedure. We don't actually keep it running for a longer time because it will generate more problem, because if you are running for VMware especially, your cache, your Delta is running on the mount server. It's not supposed to keep it running for a longer time because VMware already stated if you are running on Delta snapshot, you should keep it running within 24 hours only. Maximum they can support maybe 72 hours. It's not supposed to run that long. That's why if you want to keep it running, you should not be doing that, okay? Although they do support it. So to be safe, you need to migrate to production after you found that when we restore, when we already trigger instant VM recovery, virtual machine working fine, no issue, people can still start working, then we will start the migrate to production straight away. Do not wait until longer time. If not, it will generate even more problem later, and then you are stuck. Because when you already start to have production data written, your mount server Delta will be also important to you. If not, you will cause data loss. It will cause additional data loss to the new and change data captured in Delta mount server cache. Okay, so not recommended to do that. If you're doing testing, no issue, but for production, soon as you already triggered a task, best is to migrate to production ASAP. Do not wait until like 1 week or 1 month's time. It will be too dangerous for you to do that, and usually it might cause you more problem than you want. Okay, so it doesn't design to work halfway. That's why you need to trigger the migrate to online straight away if you can. So do not wait until like 1 or 2 months or 3 months time. Maybe you can still complete the task, maybe not. If you cannot complete, what happens? Your delta is on the mount, your new change data is there, and you have issue now to consolidate the disk manually because VMware is pretty sensitive in delta snapshot. So usually if you have any issue on the linkage, etc., you need to actually incur that data loss already. There will be no options for you to actually do anything to it. Okay, because the delta is not a full complete VMBK, for example. Okay, so remember, okay, they do able to run, but it's not recommended because it will generate more problem. So this is the restorability. And if you found that instant VM recovery, maybe performance is too slow, etc., then we will go back to traditional restore. Now, traditional restore here, we have the full VM recovery. Inside your virtual machine backup, they will call it the entire VM restore. Right? So entire VM restore here, you can now choose which backup. They will restore the data back to production first before they will power on or utilize it. Okay? So this will be the traditional mode that requires longer restore time because they will need to wait until all your data are written back to your production environment before you can actually use it. Right? So using this full VM recovery, similar case like your instant VM recovery, we can restore to original location to a new location. And we have this additional cost stage restore that we will also cover later that requires the Sure Backup Data Lab or Virtual Lab helps to do this. Okay, so later we'll see what is a scenario that we will utilize this option. Now, if you trigger the full VM recovery option, okay, so full VM recovery here, we have another additional thing here called quick rollback or what we call incremental restore. Now, this quick rollback will be utilizing CBT to perform your virtual machine data rollback. Now, when we see rollback, it's very sensitive because when you're doing rollback, it will also delete your new added data. And your newly added data to the VM will also get discarded, and they will also roll back all those change data that already happens in your virtual machine, according to the CBT from your last backup. So this quick rollback is good to use if your virtual machine, as you can see here. Okay. So your virtual machine here, you will see they have this. If your virtual machine is caused by gas OS software level issue or a user error, and there's nothing to do with your hardware or the storage running your virtual machine, you can try to use this to restore your virtual machine. But it will also discard your newly added data. That's why this is very important here. So if you want to restore something and you want to remit also your new data, then do not go with this option. Now, this option is good to use when you plan to upgrade your VM. For example, I want to upgrade my virtual machine OS or my application, and you're not sure whether it will work fine or not. Okay, after upgrade, then I can perform one latest incremental backup. Okay, you need to plan downtime for that already. After your service is down, I back up the virtual machine for one last time. CBT will get reset based on the last backup. So when you perform your OS upgrade, application upgrade, all this will be captured inside the change block tracking. Okay. Then later, after upgrade, you find that the VM is not able to boot whatsoever. Those are what we call logical level issue. I can utilize this quick rollback. So this quick rollback will check based on CBT from the last backup, what are the data added in and what are the data changes. I will just delete all those newly added data and proceed to roll back all those data that got changed when they are doing the upgrade. So this option will help you to only restore certain data that is affected by the upgrade only. They don't touch major all your data in the virtual machine. That's why if you go for quick rollback, it will be usually faster And because they don't actually restore everything, they only restore those that actually keep track from the change block tracking function. Okay, so this only applicable for logical level error. And remember, if you trigger this, your new data will also get discarded. In the exam, if not mistaken, they do ask this question before. Okay, so if you trigger this, your new data will get lost. That's why they will ask you a few options to restore certain data. Okay. So customers are looking into restoring certain things and they want to remain their new data added into the virtual machine. You do not choose this quick rollback. If not, your new data will get destroyed. Things like this. Okay, so this is the additional options in the full VM recovery process. Then we have the NAS recovery and restore. Okay, so entire VM recovery, pretty straightforward. It's just traditional ways of doing things. And for NAS data restore, NAS, when you back up the storage, okay, you can restore either individual file or folder, no issue. Now in Vim, okay, in version 11, they added in this new feature called instant file share recovery. Okay. Now you have your NAS data backed up into your repository. I can now trigger instant file share recovery to open up the entire NAS backup back to your user, and they are able to continue their work. Okay. This option is pretty cool. Okay. They do have some limitation here, so let's see. Okay. This is new feature from V11. Yeah? V11. Now you will see that over here, the scenario is I have my production NAS. Okay, production NAS. Now I have my production NAS here. I'm doing backup already. Now you see that your repository comes with the same data, for example. Okay. Now this instant file share recovery only supported for SMB. Yeah? As NFS does not have this option yet. Okay, only for SMB. Then first thing, when the production is down, what happens? I can now utilize my backup repository NAS data. So my NAS data here come with all your folders, etc. here running. Okay, maybe you have your share, your folder, all this inside the repository. So how can I actually trigger the instant file share recovery? I will be using the mount server help me. So the mount server will help me to actually mount the backup data, open it up, and offer an additional file server perspective to your client. Okay. Now, instead of restoring the original location, now I'm trying to open up the file share service temporarily. Why do we need this? Pretty easy, especially when you have a very huge NAS storage in the environment. Okay. For example, here I have like maybe 50 TB NAS data or even higher. Now, not easy for you to get another new equipment that can support 50 TB, especially a NAS storage. It's not going to be cheap. And usually for company, they will only have one set of production. Okay. Now, if the hardware is having issue, then now you are stuck. Because why? I have no place for me to restore all this data fully. Then what happens? I need to wait until the NAS storage to be fixed. Maybe within days or weeks, I have no NAS access. So your company will be ceased of operation because a lot of clients will be relying on your document, PDF, or this to continue their business, right? So now if due to part delay, etc., your NAS storage will not be able to come up anytime soon, what we can do? We can now trigger this option. At least I can open up my backup data in the repository for the client to use first. Okay, so the only problem here is this guy is read-only. Okay, read-only copy. Now, read-only is better than nothing because I can now access to the from the client point of view, copy and actually do edit locally. Now, at least you copy the file back to your machine, you can continue your work. After that, only they actually write change data back to production when the NAS storage is up. So this will able to continue the business, basically to shorten overall RTO. Now for NAS data, yes, this is a workaround. At least you can let the end user continue to work. Right? As compared to no file share at all, this will be easier way of doing things. Okay? While you're waiting for your NAS storage to come up, no issue, you need to first decentralize your file access. So after you share has a read-only, they need to copy down to their own machine, do edit. Later, they need to copy back to the production NAS. Okay, so this is V11 function. Only SMB protocol, meaning to say Windows-based client NAS storage is supported for this instant file share recovery. Read-only copy. Okay. Any question regarding this instant file share recovery for SMB? Here's refund easier. Okay, so now, because we are utilizing the mount server to share my backup data NAS, my mount path you will see from the earlier one is now changed. So from your client perspective, I need to change our mount path either by changing the script or whatsoever to point to a different server, right? Okay. So this is the main I want to use. Nope. Generally, no SMB version limitation yet. Okay. Can double check from document for more info. Okay. Okay, so if you have problem or maybe you are utilizing Windows distributed file system, DFS. Okay. So if you're using distributed file server here, DFS, basically your client will be connecting to this guy first. Okay. So your client will be connecting to this namespace instead. So from the DFS point of view, it doesn't change. You do not need client to change anything. But I can actually do some changes here towards this namespace shortcut inside DFS. So from sales, maybe having some issue due to data corruption or maybe the NAS storage having problem, I can now disable the original one and then change to the newer one here. So from the client perspective, it doesn't require to do any changes. Okay, so client can able to access to the same data again, but it will be now read-only because it's actually connected and offered from the backup mount server now. Okay, at least client can continue to work, but you need to send an instruction for the client to copy the data out to their local machine to do edit before they can actually continue their work. And then later, after the production NAS is up, they need to copy back to the production NAS storage. And we will back up from that instead. Okay, so this is very important here for your instant file share recovery. And if you are utilizing standalone repository, okay. For example, I created multiple NAS backup job, comes with multiple different NAS folder as your source, but in the backend, the job itself are pointing to different backup repository, for example. Okay. So now you will see the backup repository A come with share 1, 2, 3, then B come with 4 and 5, for example. Okay. So what happens? Now this 5 share is actually comes from the same NAS storage earlier. Meaning to say one single mount path can connect to all these 5 folders. Now due to the limitation in Vim, when you're utilizing standalone repository, right, they will have their own mount server ready. Now when they actually trigger instant NAS file share recovery, they will utilize their own mount server respectively. And so this is some limitation here going on with this particular individual standalone backup repository. So to fix this, you need to make sure both repository is utilizing the same mouse server. So it will not be easy because especially for a large environment, it's not easy for you to actually change this and your flexibility will have some issue. Okay? So this is some of the limitation that you need to be careful. That's why if you're utilizing scale-up backup repositories, remember, we covered this yesterday. Now, when they are running on scale backup repository, when my backup job is pointing to SOBR, when you trigger the instant NAS file share recovery, they will utilize the first mouse server from the first repository extent usually. So that mouse server will be automatically used to mount all your backup data and then offering your instant file share access directly from the same mouse server. So this will be automated if you are utilizing SOBR. If not, then you need to manually change the mouse server configuration before you can actually combine them into one and share it out. Alright. So it's a bit tedious and not flexible enough if you're using a standalone. So if you're using SOBR, then it will be automated for you. Okay, so you do not need to worry that your NAS data is sitting in all three repositories. When you trigger instant file share recovery, they will be presented as one mouse server file share. Right, so this is some of the additional things support from SOBR. And then in V11 now we add in this new feature 2 for a file that has missing of permission. Yeah, so when you back up your data, maybe you selected only folder levels, remember, on the ACL permission access. Now, there are certain files and folders actually broken inheritance sometimes. Okay? So over here, what happens? If I restore the data back, you will find that certain file might not have permission sometimes. Okay? Because you did not read the entire attribute, etc. So what happens? I can now configure on the recovery task to push the permission from the parent to all those child items. Okay? So that I can now assign forcibly with special permission to all these files and folders. At least you can now have additional control on the folder after you restore, whether they can be accessed by certain groups of users or allow all or deny. So this will give you some flexibility and automation to be done on the file share first when you trigger the instant file share recovery. So you will have lesser headache. At least you know that when you actually trigger this with automation, you know most of your folder will able to get accessed by most of the people here. Okay, so you can pre-plan ahead. This will apply to those folder or files that has no permission, etc. Just back off. They will just push this into them, okay, from parent itself. So this is also new in version 11. Okay. Okay, so those are the instant file share recovery. Now for NAS backup data, instant file share is one of the new features offered in V11. If you are not looking onto the entire file share restore, maybe you just want to look for certain files and folder that is accidentally deleted by user, you can still browse your NAS backup data and then select individual item to restore back to your production. Okay, it's supported from V10 until now, no issue. Okay, just that they now give you additional options to restore the entire thing straight away, instantly. Okay. Any question for your NAS file share recovery? Here, using instant recovery. Okay, no issue, straightforward. Okay, then we move on to the last part here called the stage restore. Okay, stage restore. Now, stage restore here is basically part of your entire or full VM recovery process. Now, traditional restore method, we need to restore all your data back to production first. And if you require changes, I will only change it later after all your data got restored. For example, maybe deleting certain account that's not supposed to be there, etc. Things like this. So it will be quite tedious for backup admin because they need to wait until all the data got restored, maybe in a few hours or even one night. And the time frame will not be easy for you to schedule. You do not know when are you able to do the change. Then you need to wait there without doing anything. Okay, so over here, we will give you these particular additional options to automate the task and actually bring the changes before your actual data restore using stage restore. Okay, so this is the main scenario here. So let's see the example here, looking into John Smith as one of the public customer. So John Smith registered to the platform. Okay, for example, I have a customer doing e-commerce, for example. Okay, so John Smith registered to my customer e-commerce platform. They register their account, put in their main information, etc. into the DB already. And John Smith starts to explore maybe the platform or website, etc. Now, after John Smith created the account, I actually create a backup. Okay, so the backup for this DB will capture John Smith data in it, right? So later when I restore the DB, John Smith data will still be there. Okay? No issue if John Smith is still their customer. What if John Smith later tested and said, nah, this platform is not suitable for me. I do not want to use this platform anymore. I want to delete the account and exercise the right to be forgotten. Now, this is a very important thing for GDPR compliances, especially in Europe. If the end user customer do not want you to keep their data, you have no rights to remain their data in the production system at least. Backup, no, not able to do anything because it's already there. So if you restore to production, you're not supposed to have John Smith data there anymore. So if the customer found out, maybe the company will get into legal issue. Okay. So over here, what happens? When John Smith deleted the account, I did not able to do a latest backup and the DB crashes. Then what happened? Your database crashes. When I try to restore from my backup, John Smith data will still be there, right? Okay. So what happens? Over here, if you know that certain user account should be removed before your production system go online, you can now put these changes into automated tasks using scripts, for example. So I can put in a script to remove John Smith details before I restore the backup data back to production. So you're bringing the change before the actual data restoration. Okay. So with these automated tasks, you know that after the virtual machine restore, you know that John Smith data will not be there and the VM can straight away go online after the restore has been done. Okay. So this will basically simplify the task of the backup admin because you can automate it and they will eliminate a lot of additional wait time for the backup admin to wait for the entire thing to restore. Okay, so usually maybe a few hours or one night sometimes. So you can automate the task and then the backup admin can go back to sleep, come back later in the morning and then you will see everything come back online already. Okay, so lesser wait time here. So for stage restore, as you can see, is part of your full VM recovery. I will require the virtual lab. So this we will cover later in the sure backup topic. The virtual lab will be the environment for you to able to boot up and also put in your virtual machine data there to run like a normal VM to execute certain scripts. So your virtual machine is booting up from your backup data in the isolated environment required. So they do not have any issue to clash with your production network, so-called. Okay. So after the change has been done, they will basically shut down the VM and then perform quick migration to your production environment. And then you will see that these changes that's earlier captured in your cache delta, they will also be sent and applied to your final restore options here. Okay. So you will see here, stage restore, we will require the virtual lab. This is the standard SOP. What they do, they will boot up the virtual machine and then run the script. The script will be captured inside the Delta disk as changes. So when they restore the data, they will restore the original data together with these Delta changes applied to it. So after the restore, you will see that John Smith data will not be there anymore using this stage restore process. So later, you will see that this stage restore, okay, will help you a lot on removing certain data that it is not necessary to be there anymore. Alright. So any question regarding this stage restore before we move into the lab environment?